Thank you, and welcome to today's presentation sponsored by TrenData on driving financial results through people analytics. Now, here's a brief agenda of what we're going to cover today. I'd like to give you a little overview of who TrenData, the company, is. We'll spend a minimal amount of time on that, and then we'll launch into the meat of the presentation. And there we'll begin with talking a little bit about HR budgeting and the struggle HR often goes through to get their requests put on the budget and treated more as part of the efforts to grow the business rather than merely an expense. Then we'll look at some key workforce metrics that will help you both make that case and also show how investment decisions in HR can generate real bottom line revenue and profits for the company. And then after we've talked about that, we'll launch into a demonstration of the TrenData People Analytics solution. And finally, at the end, we'll answer some questions from the audience. So if you do have a question right now, I have everybody unmuted because we have a very large audience here today. Please submit them by chat, and I will answer them at the end of the presentation. So who is TrenData? Well, TrenData is a cloud-based platform company that provides organizations the ability to generate advanced and predictive analytics by unifying and trending metrics through multiple HR software applications. So we essentially take information from your HRIS system, your talent management system, your recruiting system, any of your finance systems, or time and attendance, whatever, and we put them all onto a common platform that can give you both full employee life cycle analytics with filters that can be drawn from any of the platforms, and also allows you to tie this people data in with your financial data, which is the subject of the presentation. We're located in Plano, Texas. For those of you who are not familiar with the area, it's just a stone's throw north of Dallas. We're also often considered part of the DFW Metroplex. The founders of the company are myself, Tom McKeown. I'm the CEO. And my co-founder, Mon Hamden, who chairs our board, was the founder and CEO of HR Smart, a very pioneering talent management company that was sold to Deltek, a larger software provider, 2 years ago. So let's look a little bit about the challenges as HR professionals you have in getting the resources, both technology and people, that you need. So here's just a little graph that was put together by KPMG recently, talking about budget intentions for companies from 2015 through 2017. And as you can say, I'm not sure what the actual driver was in this, but back in 2015, we were pretty well into the economic boom and recovery, but yet still at that point, 58% of companies were planning on decreasing their HR spend. As you can see, that's gone down a little over these preceding years, 2016 and 17, while more companies have decided to increase their spending. And it's kind of been flat or a little upwards of companies that have decided to keep their annual HR budgets the same. So in order to make your case or to point out how HR investments can drive financial results, I think it's first important to point out some of the key workforce metrics that HR tracks in order to judge success or failure of one of their initiatives. The three key ones are the ability to recruit good people, the ability to drive and increase performance, and then the ability to actually retain high-performing people once you brought them on board. You don't want to recruit them, train them, get them to peak performance, and have them run away to one of your competitors. Now, those are the results that you're looking for of your initiatives in HR. But what are the investments that you have to make? There are numerous. The first is, compensation. You, of course, have to pay people, and you have to pay them well, particularly the high performers, if you want to keep them around. Money goes into training people, both in onboarding and future career and management development. Things like work-life balance and other things that go into the culture don't as often have as tangible physical costs, but there is an investment made there if you're going to let more people work from home, or you're going to try and create a funner environment at the office. And then the last one is technology. You have to give people the tools they need to succeed, both the individual contributors who need PCs, phones, whatever, laptops. And then there's, of course, the large systems, HR, ERP, finance that you need to invest in, particularly in large companies to have success and be able to track your information. Now, the problem for the HR professional is that when pitching to the C-suite, you often find that they very much understand what costs are. So you show them compensation and budgets for all of the above things, and they are able to understand that very, very well from the beginning. What you have to be able to do, and this takes some more pitching, is the ability to both detail and put an ROI together that shows that those are not just expenses towards all those investments on the top line, but they are in fact investments that are going to yield a return, both in the quality and production of your workforce and how that turns into revenue and bottom line profit for the company. So let's start on the recruiting end. But while doing that, I do want to point out some things that are good benchmarks to use in calculating success and failure of your workforce in the company. Now, what I've got here is a graph provided by Prisonics. They did a study back at the end of 2016 that calculated averages, and it is from medium to large companies in the US, of what the average revenue per employee is by some various vertical industry sectors. As you can say, they're pretty impressive numbers, anywhere from 300,000 on the low end with industrials to energy, where it's very, very high, over $1.7 million, and all those in between. So this is what a company averagely, if you take the company's total revenues divided by the number of employees, this is the figure you would get. So recruiting a successful employee into the company gets you somewhere in this, and we'll talk about that a little bit more. Now, if you look at what it takes to recruit somebody and get them into the company, on the front end, you're talking about, SHRM did a study that concluded that the average cost to hire someone in 2016 was about $4,200. The average time to fill an open position is about 42 days. But on the downside, or a downside item, is that about a third of employees who are recruited actually leave the company within 6 months on average across all these industries. So that's the type of employee you'll put investment in and never get a return out of. So one thing to kind of look at this from a performance standpoint is another study done by a leading HR practitioner, Dr. John Sullivan, and this was detailed in Personnel Psychology, is that the average high performer outproduces their average performers by a ratio somewhere near 4 to 1. And again, that's just your average performers in the organization, not underperformers. So using that benchmark can do a lot to point out how you can grow revenues by producing a superior performing workforce. So let's look at the one industry of the ones we were talking about earlier, financials. So the finance industry, the average revenue per employee is about $654,000, as documented on that earlier slide. So if you look at the employee life cycle as you go across, you go out and recruit someone for about $4,200. Probably some or most of the first year, there's a lot of training and onboarding that goes on with that employee. And during that time, you're still mostly in a cost negative situation. You're paying their compensation. You probably are incurring some training and onboarding costs and such. So really up to this point, the company's paying out, doing the investment as we talked about earlier. And then once, probably after about a year, the employee starts producing on the positive side. So you're still giving them their compensation, probably some incentive, a bonus, commission, whatever. and you're starting to get that 654,000 revenue per employee back. Now, if you look at that figure, that 654, and you kind of extrapolate with the 4-to-1 ratio of the high performer to the average performer, what you're essentially getting is, if you assume 20% of an organization are high performers, you're looking at high performers bringing in about 1.6 million, where an average performer would bring in only about 408,000, so to speak. So that 4-to-1 ratio definitely would want you to pursue more high performers. Because if you take that math and look at it extrapolated, which I'll do in a second, it goes out to quite an extent. So if you want to stick with the recruiting angle at this point and look at where are you sourcing your employees from, you might find that you're getting a large number of employees from a certain source, but what you really want to do is to be able to track where are you getting your best performers. So if you have a system for recruiting that tells you where you're getting all your hires from, but you're able to filter that with who is getting the best performance ratings, then you know where to go invest your resources to go and get more high performers as opposed to average performers in your recruiting methods. So spell this out in revenue as you want to go and make a case for a recruiting system or some other type of HR system. You look at it from the standpoint, if you have a 1,000-person company, 1,000 times that 654,000 per person, it's still a nice, $654 million in revenues. And if you take that 20/80 that I talked about earlier, if you're getting 20% of your employees are high performers versus the other 800, that's how the revenue sticks at about 654. But if you can start to increase the amount of high performers in your company, so suppose it goes from 200 to 300, and the number of employees that are average is, goes down 100, you've now increased the company revenues by about $122 million. And you can see it continually goes up for every high performer you have in lieu of an average performer. If you look on that on the flip side, you've got retention. Here's a graph provided by Compensation Force, again, for data from 2016 by industry of turnover by these various industries. You can see that the bar that's left, it has total turnover, which looks like at about 17%. But you can see the blue and red documents what was involuntary versus voluntary turnover. And voluntary turnover is, of course, the larger block. What you find, though, is that voluntary turnover tends to be very consistent, whether it's a good economy like it is now or a bad economy like it was during the Great Recession. And the reason for that is most of your voluntary turnover are your high performers because they're very hireable regardless of what the economy is. It's when things get bad and companies increase that red, which is involuntary turnover, and they start terminating average and lower performers at a higher rate. But that blue section is the one that should concern most companies if you're losing a lot of voluntary or high performers, because going back to the same math we talked about before, if you have a 1,000 employee company and 15% turnover, that means you're shedding 150 employees in a year. And again, if you look at it similarly to we did in the recruiting, if 100 of those people who are leaving are high performers and 50 are average performers, you're losing $183 million, versus if you half the number of high performer turnover and more of the turnover is average performers, you're looking at about a 50% increase if you go from the limited number of high performers to the higher number of high performers. And this is kind of an argument where you might even look at during good times whether there is an acceptable amount of turnover within an organization. Because if you're able to turn over average performers and replace them with high performers, you're going to find that your bottom line goes up a lot more. So it's not necessarily healthy to have zero turnover at a company. Perhaps just you want to stem the tide of the high performer turnover. Now, kind of expanding on that, what are the types of things that keep high performers in place or with the company? SAP and Oxford University did a study last year, which came with some both expected but also some interesting anomalies with past studies. The top three things that high performers were looking for in a company were, number one, of course, compensation. And there were some drill downs on that compensation, which bear note. First of all, the compensation has to be competitive with the industry. You may think you're paying someone a lot, but if they can go out to the internet and find that the average for their position is 20% higher, they're going to leave pretty quickly and find something else. They also like compensation to be performance-based. If you have a high performer who's producing 4 times as much as an average performer and they only make 10% more in compensation, they're not going to think that's just, and you're going to risk flight there as well. So a couple of things on compensation to bear in mind. Also, number 2 was the one that was kind of a surprise, is that high performers really want regular feedback. You would think, or some people assume that, you have a high performer, you just don't want to micromanage them and let them go and send them to do great things. But really what they want is they want critical evaluation because they want to improve. And they also want to advance and do better at their jobs. And the fact that came out in the surveys is that 53% of managers don't provide this regular feedback. So don't assume if you have a really good, high-performing employee that they like necessarily being let go and not let alone and not being met with regularly. Meet with those high performers and, don't micromanage, but you got to give them the regular feedback and help them grow, which kind of lays into the third point of career development. High performers like to hire on for a career, not just a job. So when they go to work somewhere, they want to perform at certain levels, but also see that there's a pathway for them to rise and move forward in the company. So this is very important. And one thing to point out is high-performing people tend to be very intelligent. And one of the downsides about very intelligent people is they tend to get bored quickly. So if you have someone who's been doing the same job for 2 to 3 years of a highly productive and intellectual capacity, chances are they're getting itchy feet and might want to move somewhere else if they don't see a next move soon. Now, another surprise in the study was in a lot of other studies done by SHRM and World at Work, which only tracked total employee retention statistics, work flexibility always entered in at 2 or 3, and it didn't actually appear on this survey. So it kind of speculated a couple of reasons for this. One is, perhaps high performers, I know that's true with a lot of mine, they like to be at the office in the mix around where the action is. So working at home and things like that don't necessarily figure into their thinking as much. But it also might be that high performers get the work flexibility automatically. If you think of someone in sales who's a 300% of quota performer, and they take the afternoon off to go watch their son play soccer, the manager probably generally doesn't bust their chops about it. So it's probably a combination of both. One, they like to be around the action, and 2, they get the work flexibility almost as a given by being such a high performer. Talking a little bit about the benchmarking of the salary. So it's important to be able to track what's being paid outside in other companies, particularly your competitors, for certain positions. The primary reason is that the information is so easy to find these days with the internet. An employee can go out, and just before I did this presentation, I do this all the time, but I Googled salary survey and common salaries for analysts, developers, salespeople, and you get 4 or 5 pages of things that you can just download right away. So the point is, if your employees are able to do this very easily, the employers need to do it as well and be able to preempt and pay people correctly, because The worst time to find out that someone is being underpaid in the market is when they come to you and say that they've accepted another offer, and then you have to scramble. You never knew they were unhappy or anything, but then you have to make a counter offer. And again, most people, once they've made the decision to move, their mind is gone. So you need to preemptively strike in these scenarios. The whole thing around it is, getting back to the initial point, is to make sure that you're positioning your investments to produce results, financial results. So you're going to put money into compensation, work-life balance, training, development, technology. You got to be able to put a justifiable case together that those investments are going to yield financial results down the road. And that way the C-suite will listen to you a lot more carefully, and chances are you have a much better return chance of getting the investments you need to improve the workforce and the company. So how can people analytics software help in this? Well, there's a number of different ways. I'll talk about them from a high level before I get into the demonstration. But number one, it helps you visualize the whole situation. I can't tell you how many times we've been out to sell our software, and we sell it in a trial version where people pump their data into it and go, oh, holy cow, I didn't realize I was turning over that many people. That's usually the first reaction, because when it's given to you on a spreadsheet, it's just a list of rows, and it doesn't necessarily register. When you see a graph that produces that, you know right away that you have a problem. Also gives you the ability, as I talked about earlier, to give you these cross-filtered metrics. What you find is in siloed applications, if you have just an applicant tracking, just a talent management, just an HRIS, they're very good at generating reports and stuff within their own applications, but they don't give you that full employee life cycle where you can filter in metrics from other applications to give you the full picture. Also, they don't give you the ability, it's necessary that be able to trend these metrics over time like a people analytics solution does. So not only can you see that turnover is 7% today, but was it 12% 2 months ago and 20% 6 months ago? And is that trend going in the right direction, and you're seeing things that you need to do? Or is it going in the other direction and you need to undo some things that you started to do? So being able to trend really gives you the context. And then projecting that trend out into the future and seeing where you're going, and having the ability to put together various modeling scenarios. Well, if I change this or increase this, will this make the future look, will this make the future better as far as losing fewer high performers and generating higher revenue for the company? So all that said, at this point, I'm going to drop out and do a quick demonstration. So I'll move over into the solution. And so what you see now is a standard dashboard when you log into the TrenData system, which talks a little bit about what metrics you're looking at. So I'm going to increase this here a little bit and show you the full system. So over here we have number of employees. Down here we have tenure, and we have about 4 or 5 other metrics. The out-of-the-box version of the solution comes with 18 preset metrics that you can use: succession planning, compensation, absenteeism, performance goals. You could put whichever ones you want here on the main dashboard, and others you can put into a side panel. If at any point you want to put these side panel ones onto the main dashboard, you would just click the plus icon, and they would move then onto the main dashboard for your ability to see them. Now you see underneath each metric, there is a drill down for the current metric, the ability to put it into an analytic format, and predictive. Now the current metrics you're seeing right now are just for the most current snapshot in time, which our metrics are. So it's telling you how many employees were I based on the last refresh of data, whether it was real time or on a monthly upload. If I wanted to look at previous time periods, I can just simply go over and click on this clock icon, and it will show by month, if I wanted to look at, what was my situation in September, it'll go back and tell me what the number of employees and all the other metrics were then. I can also go back and look at year-to-date aggregation, or I can look at some custom time period or some preset annual periods. I'm going to go back to look at just where we are today and do a couple of things. So if I go to this employee, so I've got 1,017 employees at the company right now. If I drill down on that, it allows me to see those employees filtered in various ways. This one shows me that by department, whether it's consumer, commercial, mortgage, or whatever within this company where I have my employees. I have a number of filters that some are preset and some can be added through a configuration. If I wanted to look at where everybody is by location, I could do that as well. Or if I wanted to take a look at job level as well, I can look at that, how many people I have at various levels within the company. So very simple to do the drill down. If I want to look at some analytics, I'll go over to this source of hire. And again, this shows me in the last month, where I'm getting most of my hires from. If I click the analytics, it'll actually show me over the last 12 months where I've been getting most of my hires from, or the sources of where I'm hiring. And I can see by this blue icon that I'm getting most of my hires from job boards. We can expand the time period here to see if that's consistent. If I want to go back 5 years and see things annually, that still does seem to be the case. And as you can see, I have the y-axis is in actual number of people. I can change that to percentage if I want to represent things. If you have a particularly large company, you may not want to have that all in numbers, but definitely the amount of where I'm getting my most people is from job boards. Now let's look at the cross-filtering aspect. So if I click on this magnifying glass, I have a few other options with which to filter. So if I come over to here and under performance, I can then scroll down and look at the performance ratings people have gotten. So 4 and 5 are what I consider high performers in my organization. So if I click off the other performing indicators, I can see that now I see where am I getting all my high performers, and a consistent but different pattern emerges. Whereas I was getting the largest number of high performers from the largest number of hires from job boards, the largest number of high performers are coming from a combination of employee referrals and LinkedIn. So this is a good justification to go and say, perhaps I need to be focusing more of my recruitment efforts and investments on those mediums and not so much on job boards. If I go back again and look at a few other metrics, down here shows me hires versus terminations. So it tells me in the last month, I hired 22 people, but lost 48 people. And that's an alarming statistic. I might want to again go and check from an analytics standpoint as to why that may have happened. So I click down on the analytics there, and it shows what's been going on over the last 12 months. It shows for a good part of the year, we were outpacing hiring versus terminations and bringing people on board. And then somewhere around May or June, the trend started reversing. One thing we allow in the TrenData system is the ability to align events with trends. So if I go over here and I click on the events overlay button, it's going to show me some of the things that have happened during this time period. So when things were going good at the in the fall, we had hired a new COO, and we implemented a new benefits plan at the end of the year, at the beginning of the year, which seemed to have positive effects. But then we announced a merger with another company in the industry, and perhaps that frightened people off. We put a freeze on hiring, and some people didn't want to get caught up, and perhaps that started the attrition rate. So a number of ways you can look at the data, but this ability of being able to align events with trends is very powerful for your decision-making process. Now, kind of an add-on to or an extension of the hires versus terminations is just being able to look at overall turnover rate. Right now, I can see that my turnover rate last month was 4.5%. And if I go to the analytics again, it's going to show that upward path that we've started to talk about in the hires versus terminations. And if I go in the predictive mode, it's going to actually push that out a little further and show the last 6 months of turnover and what it's projecting for the next 6 months. So you can see it kind of goes up to a certain level and levels off a little bit, possibly looking at the fading impact once the merger takes place, or management has maybe assured people that jobs are going to be lost or whatever. But this shows that termination goes up to a level and stays there at turnover. How can I fix that, though, for example? So what we allow you to do, as you can see, there's a listing of individuals in the current view up above here. But if I wanted to do some modeling, I can pull up a summary view, which will give me a listing of all of the various metrics that play into turnover. And what I can do at this point is then start to model along those things. So for example, if I press the Start Modeling button, a few of these metrics suddenly go live. So salary, for example, as you can see, this trend was going up. Total turnover is expected to be 5.3% in November at the current rate. And what would happen if I were to give a roughly 3% increase in compensation? Turnover goes down from 5.3 to 5.11, which isn't a big enough, a really huge jump, and I've just spent a lot of money, about $5 million if I'm giving everybody a $5,000 raise. So perhaps that's not the best use of that money. A lot of people in the company do say they like working from home. Right now, we've got about 1/3 of our people working from home. If I expand that program and allow half the people to work from home, that definitely does have an effect. But if you look down here, the effect seems to be more on non-high performers versus high performers. That's still pretty high at 6.23%. So if I look over the third field that I'm able to is high performers who are in professional development or training. Spending a paltry amount, not even 9% of my high performers yet are in professional development. If I accelerate that rate and say, at least for the time being, started out to be maybe 20%, that further decreases the overall turnover rate, but also cuts the high performer turnover rate by 2/3 by showing that initiative that I'm going to invest in my high performers. Even the ones I don't get to right away perhaps see this as a gesture, and they'll stick around and see that that's coming their way. So modeling is very powerful for you to be able to see and predict the future. And we have some of the best data scientists, and the artificial intelligence engine that drives our solution can help you get to these conclusions that'll build the best future for your organization. As to where we bring data into the system, I'll do a quick, just show the fact that through data sources, we can have custom integrations with whatever system you have out there. This is just a sampling of some we've done in the past. We also have what's called our tough file. If you want to just try out the system, or it's a very simple application, which often some of the mid-market companies might be able to more easily generate a file upload than draw an integration. You can just simply upload what's called our tough file, which has all of these fields in it. The red ones are the require ones, and it'll help you produce that dashboard with all of those standard metrics. We also have a way for you to simply enter financial data. So for example, you can either pull data in from a financial system through one of our integrations, or if you want to just try something out more simple by putting in, what's the gross revenue of your company, have it divide by employee, and it'll tell you your revenue per employee. And also bundling all your hiring costs together will give you an idea of what your average cost per hire is for the company. So that's kind of a quick look at the solution. I'm going to leave this and go back out to the presentation. So I said we'd leave some time at the end for questions. I did get a few through the chat facility. The first one was, Is it as easy to integrate financial systems as HR systems? Yeah, it's the same thing. If it's a database, our platform has a very open API technology where we can pull real-time data from whether it's a time and attendance, a finance system, or a HRIS or talent. It doesn't matter. We can pull it all into the platform and work and deal and project with it equally. Basically, I get the question is, how do you do the predictive part of your solution? Well, it's two parts. We have an AI engine that allow you to drive the future projections of where things are going. And also, as you use the system, it is able to gather intelligence from past patterns. But a big part of it is that we have our data scientists come in and interview the organization and find out all of the things that are particular. You know, you might have business that's very seasonal. You might be very dependent on the government buying season. You might have different reasons why people leave. Perhaps you're a government organization or a city government versus a private organization. So a lot of these things factor into it, in addition to the historical data that we are able to derive from the data you put into the system. This next one, what is the best way to launch a people analytics strategy? We actually did a past webinar entitled particularly on that, launching a people analytics strategy. And I would probably just refer you to our website under resources, and I'll show you that here in a second, where you can locate that. Okay, well, if there's no more questions, I would like to invite anybody who's on the call today to take advantage of our free trial. You can go to our website and click the free trial button. It'll allow you to do everything except the predictive part. So you can do the analytics, the drill down, the metrics, and it uses only the TUF. So it allows you to create and upload a TUF file. So if you click on that free trial part, it'll bring you to a page that has another little 2-minute video. But all you have to do is enter in your first and last name and your email address. And we use the extension on your email address to set up the trial system. So it has to be a corporate email. It won't work with the Gmail or Hotmail or anything like that. But you just set that up. It emails a link to you, and we follow up and just help you set up the TUF file, get your data loaded, and let you play around, visualize your data, and see what a benefit that TrenData is to your organization. As I mentioned earlier, you can look at other webinars. If you go to our site and go under the resources, there's a button there that talks about webinars and events, and there'll be a listing of all the previous webinars we did. And for that person who asked, yes, there is one in there that is launching a people analytics strategy. So please go and view that. If there are no more questions, then I'd like to thank everybody for attending today. And we're not quite there, but enjoy your Thanksgiving, and hope to hear from you and perhaps become a TrenData client in the near future. Thank you.